When was the last time you heard about the best teacher at your school getting fired? Or when was the last time you heard the best school in the city getting closed down? Doesn't happen
Right.
because the commitment to excellence is what helps to solidify that, right?
Sure.
And so if you're committed to excellence and that's something that's just a relentless focus for your school, for your people, and even for the students, then you're going to see the success follow.
Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Lead with Culture, the podcast. And I'm Tony Ferrara, the Director of Coaching at Floyd Consulting. And with me today is a very special guest and a friend, Father John Belmonte. Father's the Superintendent of Catholic Education in the Diocese of Venice, Florida, not Italy. So Father Belmonte and I, we've done some work together the past few years, and he's doing a remarkable job in the diocese. And we're going to talk about that today. And so it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thanks for being with us, Father.
Thank you, Tony. Delighted to be with you.
Great. In beautiful sunny Florida. So I know you were previously the superintendent in Joliet in Illinois, right? And being a superintendent of Catholic schools is actually kind of a unique and privileged experience. I did the numbers. There are 180 Catholic school superintendents roughly in the United States. There are by the same token, there's 1,000 Major League Baseball players. So it's even more exclusive. There's only 435 congressmen, right? And there's 252 cardinals. Being a superintendent is a very unique and privileged position. So we're excited that you're here with us today. Just very quickly, can you tell me just a little bit about your background, how you got from where you were raised to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in suburban Chicago, home of the new Pope. I went to Marquette University, Jesuit school in Milwaukee, joined the Jesuits after college, did our training, really trained to be in education, really kind of my whole career and priesthood, and that's been the case. So high school teacher for 15 years at a couple different schools. I was a high school principal in Milwaukee at Marquette University High School, and then for the last 15 years, superintendent in suburban Chicago in the Joliet Diocese, and then superintendent here in Venice, Florida. So I spent my entire priesthood and teaching career in education, and Catholic education, and so that's really been my life's work, and I love it. It's great vocation, great to be able to serve the Church and our Lord in this way, and so yeah, it's a great privilege.
Beautiful. And if I'm not mistaken, you recently celebrated a milestone of your priesthood. Is that right?
I had my 25th anniversary of priesthood actually a couple of years ago.
Wow.
So we had that here in the diocese, part of priesthood of the other diocesan priests here. So
Beautiful.
So yeah, so 25 years a priest, and then 37 years in the Jesuits. Yeah. So,
and for our listeners who may not be familiar, one of the strongest charisms of the Jesuits is in education. I mean, the history is full of education, correct?
Right. So Society of Jesus, largest male religious order in the church. We just had Pope Francis go home to heaven, and he was first Jesuit pope in the history of the church. And so we've always been devoted to education, really since St. Ignatius, since the founder of the order. And so the Jesuits really founded the most significant network of Catholic schools in the history of the church. And so that continues to this day, both university level and high school level, and then now even some grade schools as well. And so that's what the principal work of the religious order is to serve in education, which is one of the key things that the Catholic Church does, which is to educate youth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as I often say when I'm talking to principals, particularly in Catholic schools, that in many ways the Catholic Church invented the modern education, the formal education for both men and women. So we've got a history and a charism within the church.
It was kind of apprenticeship before, and then you have slowly but surely a system of schools. You have administration and leadership and all of those things, and many of them came out of Jesuit schools as a worldwide network.
Fantastic. So jumping right into it, the work that I've done with you and for you in both Joliet and in Florida, what strikes me particularly in regards to your leadership is it seems to be a commitment to school leaders. So really growing your school leaders, but both personally and professionally. Why is it important to grow your leaders in that way?
Well, as we have worked together over these years, Tony, I've learned quite a bit from you and from our sessions that we do, and certainly leadership and culture are the two key things I think to focus on. I just actually finished a graduation mass with eighth graders, and I talked to them about leadership because we honored some of the students who were leaders at that school, and so I have my leadership definition, which is leadership is becoming great and holy by leading other people to become great and holy. So I asked the eighth graders in front of their parents and their pastor if they wanted to become holy and if they wanted to become great, and they all raised their hands, of course. But that really is the key to me, is that leadership is leading people to greatness and bringing that out in them. And so you become great by leading other people to greatness and to holiness as well. And so that's really the beautiful gift that we have in leadership, is being able to help people to do that. And I like to say to my principals, part of my job, why I enjoy my job, is to help you to become wildly successful. Because if the leader of the school is wildly successful, then the teachers will be wildly successful, the students will be wildly successful, the school will be wildly successful. So an emphasis on leadership, providing the culture which is going to cultivate and support great leaders, is really what we're all about. And so I try to do that. Certainly don't do that perfectly, and have been greatly helped by you and by Floyd Consulting, by the works that we've done together, especially Matthew Kelly's book on culture. So those things have really helped, I think, immensely to create the kind of conversations and the sort of understanding of how you can create a culture in which leaders can grow and thrive.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I've been on both sides of the podium, both in as a school leader and then doing the training. And what again I think is unique about what you've done, it just sort of comes out and percolates naturally. The idea that the organization of school, can only be the best version of itself to the extent that the people running it are the best versions of themselves. And so the professional opportunities that I've been part of with your leaders, but then also that we've touched on those areas of their personal lives. And, because a leader who's struggling in any of the areas of their lives, be it physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, that impacts things. And so I've been very impressed that we've been able to touch on that, and it just kind of naturally flowed from what we were talking about.
No doubt. And I really think the other part of it is giving the leaders time to reflect, to pray, to think about themselves, to learn from one another. And so having these moments during the school year where they can take time together as colleagues, support each other, learn from each other, have someone like you come in and present some things to really reflect on for themselves is really valuable, because people are very busy, and certainly Catholic school leaders are very busy. And so if you can carve out some time for them to be with each other, to take some time to reflect and to pray, it really has huge benefits. And so we've done that over the years, and that's I think that's helped.
And I want to even dive into it a little bit. So again, what's impressed me is taking that time for all the things you mentioned: silence and fellowship, professional development, good food is part of it. It's not, and it doesn't hurt that it's in the places we've been have been really nice places and environment. So, but that commitment, I think you don't always see. So you have the annual gathering of leaders in the middle of the school year, which is great to start. And I'm going to say it wrong. Pronounce what you call the gathering again.
I call it a colloquio.
Okay.
Which is Italian for engaging in conversation. So a colloquio. So it's the idea that the school leaders gather together to have informal conversation and learn from each other, learn from people we bring in from the outside. And so it's so we call it a colloquio, just to give it give it a term. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, my experience here is that's exactly what it is. It is a conversation. And look, I've been doing enough of these where it can quickly become a gripe session and focusing on the negatives. But I think due to your focus on really putting tangible things in front of people, what I've sensed is it's a real desire to grow, desire to handle some of the issues. There are problems, and it's great to commiserate with that a little bit, but not in a way that, that's negative, but more. And then what are some positive ways to solve this? And that's really impressed me about the leaders that I've worked with in your diocese. And I do think that coming together is so important and pausing in the middle of the year.
I appreciate that. I appreciated the focus this past year. We try to take a theme and a virtue. And so the focus on courage, on managerial courage, the importance of it, how to put that out in front of us as a deep value that we need as leaders, and to reflect on that together. I think that those sorts of things really do help. And so putting those sorts of things out in front of leaders and encouraging them to give them the courage that they need to help them to understand how important it is part of the process, really.
Right. So let me touch on that specifically about, themes. Every time we've been down, we always talk. You say, I've got the theme for this year. And look, a lot of people, there's themes that go out, and sometimes they're just placards or words or those things. But I really sense that not only do you set a theme, but it's strategic in doing so. And then you continue to implement that theme practically. So explain just a little bit about your reasoning of having a theme for the year. And then, I think that's a big way. One of the principles of dynamic culture is, keeping mission king.
Yep.
So the theme seems to focus on what's important. And then another one of the principles is over communicating the plan. So, give us a little insight about how you picking a theme, why it's important, and then how you're able to continue to touch on it throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned, a couple of those aspects from the Matthew Kelly book of Mission is King, because that really is the way of coming back to the touchstone again and again and again. Mm-hmm. And so I've repeated these things, and I kind of repeat them ad nauseum, but it's really important. I mean, you can't emphasize it enough. And so, when we pick the theme, we pick the themes really out of our Catholic tradition, and especially emphasizing virtues in leadership, virtues at our schools. So some of it really does kind of trickle down to the students, because we want the students to also learn and reflect on the virtues. And so, with this year's theme, I mean, I can hardly think of a more important virtue for a leader to not only possess, but also to reflect on than courage. It's the virtue upon which all other virtues rest. And it's infectious. The more you exercise it and the more people see it, the more they become encouraged by it. So we do that with our students. We've, kind of built it and integrated it into really the curriculum and the whole edifice that we have from my office into the schools. But to pull out just a few of them for the teacher, for the principals is really important as well. So that's been really very inspiring. And then also to give the leaders themselves time to talk about how they exercise that leadership themselves, that kind of courage that we need in leadership. So
yeah, and it's amazing. This as a leader, and I'm sure the principals say the same thing. You think you've said things enough. Mm-hmm. You've never said things enough. They just, and oftentimes, and it's a natural response, particularly if, folks say, as leaders, we have to understand that, people they're testing it a little bit of saying, are they really serious about this? Mm-hmm. Is this really important, or is it just a passing fad or whatever? And so when you continue to emphasize it, and then you put time, effort, and resources into reinforcing it, it's all strategically built around one idea, then I think people get that you're serious about it. And the idea of virtue, while what you said, in this case, it certainly resides in the, in the environment of a faith environment. I think it's important perhaps for people to understand that the virtue is not necessarily a faith issue. Its roots back to Aristotle and the golden mean and those things is that virtue, if, when we're talking about virtue with leaders, it's pretty simple. If you ask someone, would you rather your leader be honest or dishonest? Would you
Right.
rather someone you work with be patient or impatient? The world loves virtue,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. And they are attracted to it, inspired by it. And especially working with young people, they can smell it a mile away. And if you're not authentic, they can tell, right?
Yep.
And so I like to say, just looking at leaders, I want to see a leader who's authentic, right? Kind of a real deal person. And that comes out when that person demonstrates virtues, a character quality, which is borne out through a force of habit that really becomes part of who you are. And so when people see that authentically displayed, authentically repeated over and over again, they notice it. And certainly young people notice it. And that's what they need to see. They need to see authentic leaders. And then I also like to say to our principals, which is part of the courage and part of what leaders need today, is you need to have somebody who's got drive, right? They need to have that inner kind of burning desire for the mission, and that drive has to come out. And that means, hard work. That means not giving up. And then the other thing I think with leaders today, which is related to courage, is they also have to know how to take a punch, frankly, not deliver a punch necessarily,
Right.
but take a punch
Yep.
because a lot of things come at us. And so if you have a leader who's authentic and is a reflection of the virtues that we want to see in leaders, has the drive to really work on the mission and really be committed to the mission, and then is also capable of taking a punch and continuing on. Those kinds of people are rare, but we can help them to become that way as well. Help with the authenticity, help with the drive, help with the ability to take a punch. So those kinds of qualities are really key, and it's what helps to create the culture in which success happens.
Sure. And leaders then in terms of growing that in their people, one of the things that we at least try to do in the training is twofold, as you said, and that one, really pointing out some things. So when we're talking about the culture solution training, it's simplified, but it also calls out some things. Are you doing this well? Are you really, can you have tough conversations? Are you letting people know what to expect, really? So we try to do in the training is ask some tough questions, of folks. And then on the flip side of that, I believe, and hopefully it comes across, there's a real human element to what we try to do. I mean, we started our whole interaction with your principals with the dream manager, and so that they understand that we're interested in them as people. Because sometimes I know, leaders, like the one thing you can tell a leader is it's going to be okay. When you talk about taking a punch, is that, we're going to ask a lot out of you, and we're going to be very strategic about that. On the flip side, we also know that you're a human being, and it's tough, and it's going to be okay, and you can do this. And as rough as this situation seems with this parent, as rough as this seems with this teacher, it's going to pass. And if you do the right thing. So that's the other thing I've just been impressed with. You understand, hopefully this came across in the training, is that, it is about the whole person, professionally and personally, and that what we do supports that.
Yeah, and I think the principals really responded well to the whole dream manager approach. Several of them brought that to their faculties and really wanted to help them as people to get in touch with those dreams, to just use one word, but also how they themselves are committed to mission, and all of that helps to create the kind of culture that we want to see at a school. So I really think those things spoke to the principals, not only personally, but also professionally, so that they could see the value in what they could offer to teachers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, perfect. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I did kind of sense that in our time together. We often say that, we're a coaching company. When you're coaching someone, and you talked about getting people to think about their dreams, and then also training we do with the culture solution. The whole goal of this, if we had to break it down into one thing, the goal would be to help people be more strategic in their lives, personal and professional. Have you sensed that this idea of being strategic, whether that's about personal growth of the people that are working for you, whether that's about how we hire people, how we, do certain things in the school, have you sensed that your folks have become a little bit more strategic in building a culture?
I would say yes, and I think they would say that as well. I like to emphasize goals, my own goals, goals for my department, goals for the diocesan schools. I want the principals also to develop their own goals for the school and kind of function out of that because it's very helpful. And then with strategy, I've really required all of them to have a strategic plan, to work off of a strategic plan. And so I'm proud to say that over the last 5 years, we have achieved that goal, which is to have strategic planning at every school. And so the schools function that way. I try to get the advisory school boards at each school to take responsibility for not only the planning but also the implementation of the plan. And so it is about being strategic related to these things. And the more strategic they've been able to get, I think they achieve the goals and also see the culture respond to the strategy. Because will respond to people, respond to leaders for sure, but they also respond especially well to a well thought out plan that has involved many stakeholders and is placed before people and then gets implemented purposefully over a period of time. And so all those things really help, I think, to create the kind of culture that we want to see, professional culture, to be strategic in pursuing our mission, really.
Yeah. I think people, even if they disagree with a plan, will respect a plan and understand that, okay, there's a reason for doing this. And I may not understand it completely, but there seems to be a plan and they're implementing it. And I was really, we do some polling in our training and we ask people, like, when's the last time you looked at your strategic plan? And what I was really impressed by is to a principal, it was very clear that the strategic plan has a seat at pretty much every table and every meeting and everything, which is huge if you can get that step. The other thing, we were talking about this before we started recording, and never fails. We talk culture and all things, and then eventually people want to get to the real nuts and bolts of things, and that always seems to lead, at least in my experience, but it always leads to hiring. In that area, which is one of the principles of a dynamic culture, is to hire with rigorous discipline and again, being strategic. There are challenges of finding both great leaders and finding great teachers. We discuss that a lot, in the training. Do you feel like, again, that's an area where the diocese become a little more strategic and really, rather than filling it's July, I've got to fill this spot, really being a little bit more selective and having an idea why and who we're optimizing for and hiring?
Yeah, I think the principals in the diocese, and I think this is true in the previous diocese where I worked, and is having a real deep sense of mission is key for them. And I think all of our principals have that, how to attach that sense of mission to the particular hires and looking to make, really good hires of people who are also sharing that mission is the challenge, right? And so it doesn't happen every time, and that's right. Part of the difficulty of the hiring process. And you're right, you get to the end of June and you don't have a position filled. Often the key candidates who you may have wanted to have in that position have gone elsewhere or whatever. And so some of it is also knowing that you're hiring someone who's going to need the coaching and the mentoring to bring them along. And so that's part of the challenge of being a school leader in particular. And so, yeah, you do have some, superstars who make up every faculty. But, the group that I've always had a soft spot for are the ones who I call the worker bees, right? The people who just show up every day. They're committed to the mission. They may not have a superstar day or a superstar week. They might want it to have it more often, but the worker bees are the ones who really kind of carry us. And so they're really key. And because every group has kind of their superstars who are the favorites or whatever, but it's the worker bees who get it done. And so you have to appreciate the people that you have and their different gifts and talents and how they kind of commit themselves to the mission. So all of that does come back to hiring, because it's hiring for mission and how they understand the mission, how they articulate the mission and live out the mission. Because again, the students that you serve, they can see, right? If you're just sort of mailing it in, or if you're really committed and passionate to them and to the mission.
Yep. And those, the worker bees, I'd call those A players. Those are people that show up, they get done what they need to get done. They raise your organization. Those folks over time won't tolerate a lot of B and C players. They just, so A players want to be around A players, and they don't want to be around folks who aren't putting in and mailing it in and those things.
One of my favorite teachers, who was a 40-year veteran at the Jesuit High School in Milwaukee, told me once, he said, I used to walk in the lunchroom with all of those talented teachers sitting there in the lunchroom. And this was after 40 years in the classroom. He said, I walk into that lunchroom and I think, man, I better bring my A game every day at a school like this with teachers like that. That's inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. And because we're dealing with people, hiring's not a perfect science. It just isn't. You do the best you can. As you said, like obviously we want to make sure you're only hiring A players. There are some constraints to that, particularly in the there's some unique things about education. You are under some time constraints. Parents do prefer that a teacher's actually in a room when the school starts. They're funny that way. But by going through a really strategic process and hiring, having a scorecard, knowing you at least can identify those areas going in that you need to support that teacher with, that they might be weak. That's a big entry. And then the second part to that is it doesn't always work out. There's some fits that you can't, it just for whatever reason doesn't work out, and you have to move on from folks. And that's additionally difficult in education. At least I found the old adage is a Catholic school is the only place that has 1-year lifetime contracts. Because of the emotion that's around the folks, that, the idea that you do have to move on from people. And do you think that the strategy has allowed principals to be I don't want to say freer with that, but at least having more confidence to know that, you do need good people. And if it's not working out, it's best for everybody to part ways?
Yeah, no, that's really where managerial courage comes in. And, the courage of admitting maybe this wasn't the greatest hire, the courage that comes to having a difficult conversation with someone who, you have to just simply say, this is really not working out, and so we're going to have to move on. Those sorts of things are not easy. And certainly in my position as superintendent, supporting the principals in, making those kinds of difficult calls is really important. Because, when we hire people, we want to work with them. We want to help them to improve. We want them to become great. We want them to become holy. But sometimes, like you said, the fit is just not right. And so there are those cases where you do have to move on. And, some of those conversations are the most difficult conversations that leaders and managers can have. And so, but you have to have them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And they don't go away. The problems never go away. They're always there if you don't deal with them. So kind of lastly here, what strikes me, I think you understand this, at least is what I've witnessed, and I really felt like your principals did, but oftentimes it's important to reiterate with leaders that, your number one customer is not external, it's internal. And so even to the point where, I'll ask principals this question, who does the school exist for? The reality is the school exists for the teachers, and they'll help carry out your mission. Sitting in a leadership office like you're sitting in right now, or a principal sitting in his or her office, you're limited in your ability to carry out the mission to the extent of the people who are actually carrying it out on a day-to-day basis, which are the teachers. So, flipping that script, the idea that it's very easy to allow private education to become a commodity. So we talk about, our families being our customers, when in actuality, as a leader, understanding that your teachers are your first customers, your teachers are the reason the school is there. And they will carry out the mission with the students. So all that being said, if you and I looked at this great kind of range and diverse group of principals that were in that room, all very good at what they do. In your mind, if we always mention to them of picking out the 3 qualities that everybody in an organization has to have, which is always a challenge for folks. I'll go into companies and we'll set that up and say, come up with 3 qualities that everybody has to have. And I'll come back a month later and say, how's it going? They'll say, great, we've got 7. I said, you don't get 7, you get 3. I'm gonna kind of force that even down a little bit more with you. So when you're looking at picking out a school leader for the diocese, if you do have 3, that's great. But what's the one characteristic? It can look different in a lot of different people, but what is that one thing that you have to decide that someone has or doesn't have to be an effective school leader for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and tough to decide between 7 or 12 or whatever.
Right.
I already mentioned authenticity, drive, and the ability to take a punch. And so kind of, I would say at the bottom of all that is how someone understands, lives out, and articulates the mission. And so in interviews, in conversations with people, that leader being able to articulate the mission, because that's what they have to do for their teachers, for the parents, for the students. They have to be able to articulate the mission in a way which comes across authentically, and the ability to do that also in the way they live their life. And so someone who articulates it or speaks very well, but doesn't live the mission, that's obviously a problem. And so it's got to be both in word and example. And so it's, as you said, not an exact science. And so you do get a feel for people as you're meeting with them and listening to them articulate the mission, but also kind of how they've lived it out. Those are the sorts of things that I would look for and want to see in a school leader. And yeah, it can be a little bit slippery, it can be a little bit less concrete. But in a lot of ways, when you see it, and if you don't see it, then it's probably not there.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And there's going to be things in their background that show that and demonstrate that if you're
life choices
if you're
they've made,
patient
etc.
enough to look for it, talk to people, check your references, do all those sorts of things. That's wonderful. So I did notice in talking to principals that the problem in enrollment doesn't seem, you have kind of the opposite problem of your schools seem to be thriving from that standpoint, which is unique. And I know a lot of folks listening to this podcast are, wow, it's a nice problem to have of not having room. But so with that off the table, although it's always a concern, with that off the table, what's the number one challenge for you and for the diocese in the next 5 years?
Yeah, great question. I'd give maybe a 30,000 feet answer, and then we could get into kind of lower.
Yeah.
But part of the success, I would say, and we have the fastest growing Catholic diocesan school system in the country, 40% growth over 5 years. I've, run out of broom closets to put kids in. All the schools are full. All the schools are in the black. And so it's really remarkable. And so people ask me, why is that? And I joke, with the bishop, why do we have the growth? And I say, well, 2 reasons, Bishop. One is the brilliant superintendent you hired. And the second reason is the brilliant bishop who hired the brilliant superintendent. And I usually get dismissed from the office for those sorts of comments. But really, when you're looking at it, I think we're meeting the needs of families and students in profound ways. That's why they're coming to the schools. That's why they're staying at the schools. And so one of the things, aside from the enrollment growth, and you can say demographic factors, you could say tax credit scholarship in Florida, all those things certainly play a part in it. But if we weren't meeting the needs of students and families, they either wouldn't come or they wouldn't stay. And we don't have a retention problem. And we do have a problem because we have too many people wanting to come. And so they're fleeing from other schools to come to our schools because I think, much to the credit of principals and teachers and pastors, those needs that families have, either expressed or unexpressed, are being met in really profound ways. Being part of a faith community, being part of a learning community, those sorts of things are really deep things. And so we've also seen the schools grow after 3 hurricanes since I've been down here. And so we were able to get back into business quickly after the hurricanes. And we saw enrollment grow after hurricanes. And so even after natural disasters, because the people know my child needs to be in that kind of environment. We've seen enrollment grow even in those cases. So I just think that speaks to what the schools provide for families and for young people. And I think, as you rightly say, that has very little to do with me and my office, and has a lot more to do with what goes on every day inside those schools and how they meet people's needs.
Yep. Yeah. And you mentioned those factors. Yeah. Demographics, tax credits, all those sorts of things. But, our experience is that excellence is never an accident.
Mm-hmm.
It's a habit that you live every day, and strategy, being strategic about your own life and your professional life at every level is a big part of that. And so while on one hand, for folks listening, there's no guarantee that doing all the things you're doing about building the right culture, hiring correctly, all of the things in there's no guarantee that that's going to lead to whether it's full schools or growth in your business or those things. But what is guaranteed is if you don't take that approach, it's never going to happen.
I have a superintendent colleague who says, when was the last time you heard about the best teacher at your school getting fired? Or when was the last time you heard the best school in the city getting closed down? Doesn't happen. Right. Because the commitment to excellence is what helps to solidify that, right?
Sure.
And so if you're committed to excellence, and that's something that's just a relentless focus for your school, for your people, and even for the students, then you're going to see the success follow. So,
yeah, amen. So before we go, you mentioned to me, or I think in an email, you have a unique connection to the new Pope.
Yes, yeah. Pope Leo's brother is a former Catholic school principal with whom I worked in suburban Chicago. And so I've known him for many years because I worked with him at the beginning of my time, so about 15 years ago in suburban Chicago. And so he's a Catholic school principal committed to Catholic education, a very good Catholic school principal, I also might add, and very good man, very easy to work with. I enjoyed my time with him. And so I'm looking forward to reaching out to him and maybe inviting him to come and visit the diocese here. And then the other connection with the diocese is that the other brother lives in the diocese, and he's a parishioner at one of our parishes here in the diocese. And so Bishop has reached out to him, and so he's retired down here, the other brother. So there's a little connection to the Pope's family. That's just one of the exciting things about having an American Pope and a Pope from Chicago.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Father, I appreciate your time today. If anyone is listening, to the podcast who's, wondering, do I need some of the training? Do I need some of the coaching or those things? And is it really accessible, that the training that we do, you would say to them?
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't hesitate. Even starting just by getting the books, The Culture Solution, Dream Manager, excellent resources, and then turning things over to a skilled facilitator and presenter like Tony. It's a guaranteed good session with Tony, and so I'd highly recommend it. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for listening. And as always, lead with culture.
Amen. Thank you, Tony.